Thank you. Welcome to the October 10th, 2017 regular school board meeting. Can I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Craig?
Here.
Mr. Estheimer?
Present.
Mr. Freitas?
Here.
Mr. Green?
Present.
Mr. Koopser?
Here.
Ms. Reed?
Present.
Dr. Pomponio?
Here. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Mission statement, Learning for Life. Vision statement, Southgate Community Schools, the best choice for students and parents. Revisions and approval of the agenda.
Madam President, I would like to make a motion to add two separate items to the action agenda. The first, I'll make them as two separate motions.
Okay.
First is I make a motion to add an item to the action agenda to revise bylaw policy 0170 as presented.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, are you adding two?
We need to vote on that item first.
Okay. So that's this one. We have a motion by Craig and a second by Koopser. Any discussion? I do have another, I'll wait on that one. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Second, I make a motion to add an item to the action agenda to revise bylaw policy 0155 as presented. That's the policy on committees.
Second.
Okay, have a motion by Mr. Craig and a second by Mr. Koopser. Any discussion? Motion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, I'm moving it to the action. I'd like to revise the agenda by moving the policy review from work session to, which is the committee, the policy 0155. So that's a secondary committee revision.
I'll second that.
Point of order, I'm not sure what the motion was. I don't know that we have that recorded.
I think what's happened is that, correct me if I'm wrong, from looking at this, is that Mr. Craig has one proposal on committees that he cleaned up that we have. But there was also a revision in the policy committee about committees also. So there's two different documents to revise how we work with committees that's
So
needs to be discussed.
are we moving something from a work session to action?
I'm moving the policy review, but there's actually going to be
Number
two.
5.
Yes.
So right now, the motion is to move work item number 5 to action. Am I stating that correctly?
Yes, but it's split because it was a review and there's two policies. I have to do it separately.
Okay,
But I am removing the policy review number 5.
okay.
Okay. So I can do that myself. I have a motion by Dr. Pomponio, a second by Mr. Koopser. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Now, can I have a just quick question as that? So it appears that both of those are referring to 0155. Can they both be discussed at the same time at that point?
No, we
or
have to vote on them separately.
You're going to vote on the same policy twice?
They're two different ones. I mean, it's the same policy, but they're two different revisions.
So it's the policy acceptance and then the revision.
Right. Well,
Can we accept it as revised and just have it one motion?
During the, During the,
Go ahead.
I- during the proposal for what I have brought forward, if anybody wants to offer amendments to that, it would be appropriate to discuss that at that time. But I would be confused by adopting it twice.
Point of order, for the sake of record keeping, can we identify action number 2 as a policy 0171 change Craig, and number 3 as a policy revision 0155 Craig, and then for number 4, we can do the 0155 revision Pomponio? We're going to have a hard time keeping
That's
this
right.
straight.
That's
Can-
fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
And I think that's what was just voted on was 1055, to put that as an action agenda number 4, and this is the revision being brought forward by Dr. Pomponio.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, I don't know if I need to speak this and say point of order, but we had a committee, a policy committee, which is the policy review, so this is taking it out of order, so we have to pull up and push our policy reviews to the action item along with the policies that Mr. Craig's bringing forward. The next policy revision from the policy review from the work session is going to be a new policy, which is going to be put on the action item, I guess, number 5, policy 2432, athletic logo.
A second?
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Well, point of order. Because these policies have to go in order, is there currently a policy 2432 that's called athletic logos?
No.
So,
No, it's a
so,
miscellaneous
so as we're
policy.
voting for this, I just wanted to make it clear to the board that if you were to pass this, the policy number may not be able to be this, because it will be dependent on whether or not this number is assigned to something else that the Neola policies. I can't assure you that it would be this number without looking at that manual.
Okay, just for clarification, there is a policy 2431, I believe, and I reviewed the policies while we were in the committee, and this was related but not athletic, so it was closely related, so that's why we gave it that number.
And I've been in the same situation. If we
Yeah,
don't
oh, no,
have a
that's fine.
policy 2432, and that's attached in the Neola policies to some other law-driven policy, I'm just suggesting that we can pass this with the understanding that it's possible that that numbering system would have to change,
Right,
that's all.
oh, absolutely.
Okay.
That's fine.
Dr. Pomponio, are you allowing discussion on this?
Oh, yeah.
Can I ask you why we are taking that from work item to action tonight? That
Because-
specific policy?
Well, those policies were on the policy review altogether because we had pushed this to the policy committee, which we had Mr. Craig's policies he's bringing forward, but he wanted to circumvent that process, which is already on the work session, and he's adding it, and I can't speak for him, so I don't know, but he's adding it to the action items, and because he's pulling his 2 policy from our policy committee review, that was part of our policy committee that we reviewed, so we have to.
I understand that, I just didn't think that he was discussing at all the athletic logo, so I was just wondering why that specific policy was being brought forward, that's all.
That was work that was in the policy review for the policy committee.
Okay.
Okay, so we have the revisions. Can I have an approval of the agenda with the revisions?
I don't know if you, did you vote on number 5? I don't think you voted on number, I don't know if
Okay.
that got a second
Okay.
yet, sorry.
That's okay. Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye for policy added number 5, 2432.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Madam President, I'll make a motion that we approve the revised agenda.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Craig and a second by Mr. Estheimer. All in favor, I'm
Point
sorry.
of order, second by Mr. Green.
Oh, I'm sorry. Echo. A support by Mr. Green. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Moving on to citizen comments on discussion or action items. Okay. We have a presentation by Mrs. McLaughlin, the 2016-17 fiscal year overview.
No. I don't have powers. Finance committee, but they've been canceled. As of last meeting. They'd have to ask her, could they do it, so, yeah, I just. I would have been happy to.
Good evening. At the next board meeting, our auditors, Yo and Yo, are going to do their formal presentation for our 2016-17 school year. I just want to take this opportunity to give you a general overview, and I also wanted to address all the funds. Usually with the auditor's presentation, it's focused on the general fund. It's also focused on some of the big picture items. So I just wanted to give you the final results and address a couple key issues that we've talked about during the year of how we did this year. Also, when Yo and Yo comes next week, since we moved our board meetings to the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month, there was a conflict with another school district presentation, and the districts were not close enough for Mr. Georges to join us this year. So the auditing manager that is on our job will be at the meeting next week, in 2 weeks. So this is an overview of the general fund. Total revenues were actual just under $41.3 million. The variance between budget and actual was $8,653, just a little bit shy of what we budgeted. The expenditures, our actual total was $39,536,000, and compared to our budget, we underspent, so we had a favorable variance of $302,506. So the net increase for the year in the general fund, when you compare it to our budget, our net increase was $1,761,000, which was, we did better than budget overall by $293,000. With that, that brings our fund balance at the end of the year, and that's the last line, to $2,136,000. And that is actually 6.8% of our unrestricted revenue. So we did a little bit better. We're above the 5% requirement with the state, which is good news. So if looking at the first slide, the increase of $1,761,000, one of the biggest contributing factors to that was our enhancement millage. We committed to using last year's money, since we got it so late in the year, to increasing our fund balance to meet the state requirements. So of that $1,761,000, the enhancement millage contributed $1,354,000 of that increase in our fund balance. So that left a net of just over $400,000 that actually came from operations. So you can see we received $1,387,000, and we spent just under $33,000 last year, just on some curriculum and some maintenance equipment. Also, one of the things we talked about during the year was our child care program that's in the general fund. We did recognize that it was losing a significant amount of money and costing the district. I just wanted to show you a comparison of what we budgeted versus actual. So The budgeted loss was $165,000. The actual loss was $154,000, so we did better by about $11,000. And just a reminder that we have totally changed the program. It is now a 100% preschool program. There's one room for 3-year-olds and one room for 4-year-olds. And I've been talking to Mrs. Priest quite a bit, and they are almost at capacity. They are very full. So I think that was a very positive change, and we'll track things as they go along. The next few slides are on the special revenue funds. So the food service fund, we budgeted a loss of $125,000 to get an ending fund balance of $75,000. Our actual, we did a little bit better, was a loss of $118,000. So the ending fund balance is at just under $83,000. And the area that we're really close on the revenue and even on the expenditures. The variances are very small, and the difference with the expenditures were actual food costs came in lower than anticipated. The Special Education Center Program Fund. This fund always nets out as a net fund balance of 0 because the difference is the indirect cost that's transferred to the general fund. And you can see our actual activity was a little bit better than budgeted by $16,000. The Community Service Fund, this is the total picture, and again, this fund balance is 0 because the indirect costs that we allocate is lower than our maximum, so the fund balance is netted out to 0. So this is a combination of both the Latchkey program and the enrichment program. We were a little bit lower in our projected revenue and a little bit higher, other than lower in the expenditures because our transfer to the general fund was a little bit lower. So in the Community Service Fund, the first component is Latchkey. Our total revenue was $14,000 less than projected. We were a little bit off on our projections. Did some comparisons to last year. The prior year was when we split the Latchkey fund out of the general fund. We went back, made sure that was as accurate. I think going back and looking at things, it was. We thought maybe when I was doing the projections that something might have been a little off there. But so we did some research, and there were, with the nicer weather, there were some kids that didn't do as much Latchkey and stayed outside more. And then the expenditures for Latchkey were just a little bit higher by $8,000. So overall, the Latchkey program is just over break even with the net income of $2,661. The second component of the Community Service Fund is the enrichment program. So we were very close in this area too to our budget. Very close in the revenue, just $1,500 off from our budget. And our expenditures were $12,000 better than anticipated. They ended up with a net loss of $2,000, so very close to break even, and we had budgeted for a loss of $12,652. So we did a little better there. And in cost saving measures, especially there was an issue with the advertising and the revenue not being where we originally thought it would be. This is the debt service fund, which is where the fund that we pay our principal and interest payments on our bonds. There is no budget required by law for this. Where you see the budgeted activity is when I present the L4029 in the spring, and that's basically our projected budget. We now have a fund balance of $1,399,000. We've had a couple of years where we did better than budgeted. We were able to reduce our debt levy for the 2017 tax year, and if everything continues, we'll be able to lower it even an additional amount for 2018 as well. Our capital project fund. So we finished up the projects that we started in the summer of 2016, and we were also able to start some of the projects that was worked on during this summer. So the first column, the budget, is what we had left out of the $20 million in proceeds after the spending during 2015-16. And you can see our actual performance. So we had a decrease. We had total expenditures of $8.6 million during the 16-17 year, and so there was a net decrease of $8.5 million. So at the end of the 16-17 year, out of the $20 million, we still have $9.9 million. And to show you how much that we've spent just since July 1st, that number is down to just under $5 million. And we still have some bills that are coming in for the summer work, but there was a lot of, just to the extent of the work that was done during the summer. So, again, it's just meant to give you an overview of our performance, and then you'll have the full audit report in 2 weeks. Questions?
Any questions? Mr. Craig?
Thank you. The food service fund, that's the one that we're trying to get down on that fund balance, right? So it's,
Right, well, we're trying to make sure that we can still take the full and direct costs that should go to the general fund and maintain just the fund balance. The state doesn't want it to be more than three months of operating expenses. We're a little bit lower than that, but we're trying to doing things to make sure that we maintain that.
so we don't want to make too much money.
No,
on
we
it.
don't,
wanna-
no, because then, we need to reinvest it. We did do a very significant reinvestment in the program 2 years ago when we purchased the new POS system,
Right,
so,
okay, thank you.
yeah.
So wasn't it a few years back that it was actually making money or making a good?
It's been about 3 years. Every year with the loss of students, it's hard to maintain that that profit in the food service fund because we're already at the minimum staff, and the staff and the food costs are the biggest expenditures in this fund. And Mr. Connors is always aware, he's always trying to maintain a 40% food cost. So, and he actually did that this year, so.
Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to committee reports. Okay, anti-bullying. The committee's still reviewing current procedures for incident reporting, and we'll also bring the Stop It app software and reporting process package to the full board for review of the quote and discussion. Finance, there's nothing to report yet on that. Okay, and policy, Mr. Green and myself reviewed the policies that were brought to us, or the policy that was brought to us from Mr. Craig. We reviewed 0155, 0171. A general addition was added, and we also reviewed a new policy, Policy 2432, which is on athletic logos, which Mr. Pikowski worked along with us and gave us some revisions for that. So we worked on that. We have the items on the action item today to review. Curriculum, or I'm sorry, legislative. don't think there was a meeting, Rebecca?
No, we didn't have a
Okay.
meeting, and it should be scheduled directly after the next policy meeting. So that's the first Thursday of November. Is that,
Yeah, yep. I don't know the date on that. Do you have the date on the first Thursday?
Hold on. It's the 2nd.
Okay. So that's November 2nd. Okay, curriculum, there isn't anything to report on that. The next meeting is October 19th at 4:30. Personnel, Mr. Green?
We're going to meet today, usually the first Tuesday, but there was a conflict. I had talked to you and I emailed Mr. Moore, and we will meet, is 5:30 good? I don't know what other committees are moving. 5:30 good, Jerry? For Tuesday, the 24th, we will meet 5:30 PM.
Okay, thank you. The Grounds and Maintenance Committee met today, and we discussed the facility assessments and what we're going to review and how we're going to update that in the future. And the Jude system, we'll have to review that in the next Grounds and Maintenance meeting. And I'll update you on the date for that one. Moving on to discussion, finance report, Mrs. McLaughlin.
Nothing new to report, but I just wanted to address that the budget reports that you were getting every month are now back in your board packet. So this is the first report for the 17-18 year, and it's from July 1st to August 31st. When you look at the capital project fund, it's actually no different than what I just showed you for 16-17. There were some adjustments that needed to be made in the eBuilder software that we use for the project. Those were just made, and so I just updated that yesterday. And so those will be updated for where the balance that we have available after June 30th of 17 on the next report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, moving on to curriculum report, Mrs. Pastor.
So as part of the third grade reading legislation, we had to complete K-1-2 testing. So it's called an initial test, and that was completed on Friday, October the 6th. As a result of the data from that, we have started extensive testing for those students who look like they're struggling with the standards at those levels. And we should be holding our first, what we're going to call IRIP meetings across the state, which stands for the Individualized Reading Improvement Plan meetings with parents. We're going to focus on those first graders who are the first students that will be affected by the third grade reading legislation. And this plan does require a read-at-home plan that the reading specialists will be sharing with those parents as they have those meetings in the next few weeks.
I'm sorry, for the IRIP, what does the I stand for?
Individual.
Okay.
So when a student qualifies, you have to actually decide what area you're going to focus on, whether it's phonemic awareness or phonics comprehension fluency. And so it's very individual for students based on their testing results.
And you're focusing mainly on first graders right now?
The first graders are the first group of students that are affected by that third grade reading legislation. And the third grade reading legislation basically calls for students that are a year behind getting help. And kindergartners can't be a year behind when we don't have standards for them. Doesn't mean we're not going to begin to look at students that are struggling, but that's the official language of the.
And this qualifies under the Title I funding?
So we are paying for it out of Title I and some 31A, which is the at-risk state funding. But it is an unfunded mandate in that we have to provide services, but we're not giving any additional funds. We have to shift. So for example, when you think about a reading specialist who in the past would have been able to work 100% of the time with students, because they now have to hold these individualized reading improvement plan meetings, that will take away from the time that we're servicing students in order to have these meetings. which could really benefit kids when we're giving parents good read-at-home plans. So it's sort of a catch-22. Students will get less services with the specialists. So.
Okay. Any questions for Jill? Superintendent report, Mrs. Creation?
At a fairly recent board meeting, I don't recall, someone had asked about sending letters to our new students. We've always done that for a school of choice, but the recommendation was made that we send a welcome letter to our new district students, and so those have all been sent, both to our school of choice and our district resident students who are new to the district. In the last couple of weeks, there's a small group of administrators that have been meeting to make changes in our MyStar discipline referrals and reports. We have added the required considerations and restorative practices before suspending. We're bringing everything up to date with the new law, and we reduced the behavior choices in the referral system so it more accurately reflects our common understanding and our PBIS language. Today, we reviewed all of those changes with the entire administrative team, including new reporting requirements to the state and the Office of Civil Rights. So when we do a discipline referral and we take disciplinary action, there's new requirements of what we have to report to which agency. So we reviewed that today and made sure that all of our discipline reports to date are accurate. And we also started developing a timeline in which we will train our staff because sometime during this school year, we will have to switch over to all online referrals, and they all have to be done in MyStar. We have a number of different systems right now that allow teacher referrals to be made for discipline. And the K-5 Comprehensive Early Intervention Plan, I wanted to give you an update on that. The Panorama Education Social Emotional Learning Survey, K-5, it is constructed. These are the two general education social workers. Both of the social workers trained with Panorama in how to construct and implement the surveys. This month, they will begin administering those surveys in grades 3, 4, and 5. The students actually take the survey themselves, but there's directions that you have to give, and so the social workers together will administer those surveys, and the teachers will observe for this first time. And then for K1-2, the platform is not research-based for K1-2 grades, but there is a teacher assessment component that goes along with that that's a little bit shorter version. So again, the social workers and the PBIS interventionists will be back in the classroom, and they will be providing their lessons in order to give teachers release time to do the assessment on the kindergarten, first, and second grade teachers. Our survey will measure grit. That's how well students persevere through setbacks to achieve their important long-term goals. Self-efficacy, which is how much students believe they can achieve. Self-management, how well students manage their emotions, thoughts, and behavior in different situations. Social awareness, how well students consider the perspectives of others and empathize with them. And then for the 3, 4, and 5, that's where the students answer their own questions. They will also answer questions about growth mindset, which is students' own perceptions of whether or not they have the potential to change factors central to their performance in school. On October 31st, we have a PD, and all K-5 teachers together will receive training and practice in Tier 1 supports. That's at the level of the classroom from our PBIS matrix. And we are hopeful, we don't have the final confirmation, that we can also at that time arrange the virtual training that we have paid for from Panorama in the playbook. So those of you that have been involved in this, once we finish these surveys, then teachers have important information about students that measures how well their students self-scored on grit and self-efficacy. And then there is a research-based playbook platform where they can access from a number of organizations and other teachers strategies and lesson plans and things that will support those skills while they're also teaching the content. The third part of the 31st is we are in the process of setting up, I think that will be the day that the K-5 teachers will get the training on how they do the online discipline reports in MyStar. These are all pieces and parts of the 5-year plan. So I'm going to try to, update you on the things that we've been working on relative to that. And then my last item is what we call the toolkit meetings, and this is the required implementation of the plan that was the result of our disproportionate suspensions of African American males on an IEP. Today we met for the first time this year with Karen Fales, who's from the Michigan Department of Education, and Regina Baker, that is our Wayne Risa consultant. And Ms. Fales is new to us from the MDE. And so we reviewed our progress on the toolkit plan, and it was a really nice meeting. They had very, very high praise for how much we've accomplished. Ms. Baker from RISA had not been with us since last spring, and she was pleasantly surprised. And many of the things that I'm talking about, the surveys and the changes to our discipline referrals, those are all also a part of this plan to address our disproportionality in referrals and discipline suspensions. And then we took a look at our first month's data, which was from September, which was, it was baseline. That's all that it was. So we look at the number of referrals and the number of suspensions, and then we break that down by gender and by race, and we're watching the proportionality. So the goal is that the percentage of referrals decreases, definitely that our percentage of suspensions decreases, but whatever those numbers are, that our gender and our racial groups do not have a disproportionately high amount of referrals or suspensions in relationship to the number that they represent in our general population. And that's all I have.
Okay, any questions for the superintendent? Okay. I don't have any update for the board president update. Moving on to citizen comments. Are there any citizens that need to make a comment? None? Moving on to consent. Can I have a motion to approve?
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda, which consists of September 26, 2017 regular board meeting minutes, HR update, and disbursements for September of 2017.
I'll second that.
I have a motion by Mr. Craig and a support by Mr. Estheimer. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, moving on to action. Item number 1.
I'm recommending that tonight you appoint Jill Pastor as the interim superintendent effective January 1, 2018, pending acceptance of agreed-upon terms between Ms. Pastor and the Board of Education. I also want to add a note that at the next meeting, I will add a work item in order for the board to discuss a long-term transition plan, because first of all, you need to discuss that in an open meeting, what your preference is for a permanent replacement after I retire. And I want to add some sense of urgency, because even though January seems like a long time away, I will say that Ms. Pastor at that point in time will be doing 2 huge jobs at one time, and I would not want that to go any longer than about 30 days of doing double duty. That in and of itself is going to be difficult. If you go much longer than that without a plan for a permanent superintendent, it would be to the detriment of the district. So again, I'm suggesting tonight that you at least get the determination of Ms. Pastor as the interim taken care of.
Okay, any other discussion?
Madam President,
Mrs. Reed?
this is on the action portion, but have we reviewed the agreed upon terms? Have we looked at that? Like, are we agreeing upon this now before seeing those stipulations?
This motion would only start that conversation. So it's the appointment pending the agreement of terms.
We have to develop the terms, they don't exist.
Okay. Thank you.
It's also pending Jill not running out of here when we make.
Okay, any other discussion on the topic? Okay, so,
So,
Mr. Cooper.
so could I say that, could we modify the motion pending mutual acceptance of agreed upon terms?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Do you want to read that motion again, or there's some?
I'll make the motion with that new language.
Okay.
I'll make a motion that the Board of Education approve the appointment of Joe Pastor as an interim superintendent effective January 1, 2018, pending mutual acceptance of agreed upon terms.
I second.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Estheimer and a second by Mr. Green. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Congratulations, Jill.
We think.
We can start negotiations.
She's sweating.
Leslie's holding her foot. No, no.
I have her foot chained
Right,
to the
right.
floor down here. Thank you for
Negotiations.
starting that conversation. I appreciate that.
Okay, action item number 2, Mr. Craig.
I've put an action item on the agenda tonight to modify the policy for roles of the board, 0170. As you can see, I've included the original and then a red line of what's been added. So essentially, nothing's changed from the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. It just adds a fifth category, which would be 0171.5 general. And what that's meant to do is basically acknowledge us as a board and not as individuals, and to reiterate maybe and answer some questions that we've had come up recently, so.
Okay, is there any discussion?
I have a question. Mr. Craig, in your revision, where it says Board of Education authority to act in the individual capacity of give direction to any board member or staff administration or incur legal charges on behalf of the Board of Education. My understanding is under our current terms with Thurn, the president, the office of the president can speak with a lawyer for up to 15 minutes without a charge. Is that still something you're in agreement with, to the fact that if there's an emergency, that the office of the president would have 15 minutes to make a call if needed, and then if anything afterwards, which would incur charges, would thus in fact have to come to the board?
That would be my opinion of it, yes. Is as long as they're not incurring charges. We had a conversation with Troon in the past, and they are under the impression that whenever the president calls them, that they're doing so at the direction of the board. That's not always been the case. And this would solidify that. Yes, as long as there's no charge, there's no harm to it, there's nothing to it.
I mean, the reason I asked that is that in the policy committee, Dr. Pomponio and I had reviewed this policy also, and she had brought up herself that in case of emergency, the office of the president, we had come to a conclusion in the policy meeting that the office of the president for 15 minutes, if there was an emergency, still had to have a right to call the board, our lawyer or the lawyer if needed, as long as it didn't incur charges. Is that correct?
Right. Right.
Okay, so
Yeah,
I just
that
wanted to
wouldn't-
clear that up.
Yeah, this policy wouldn't affect that.
Okay, I have something to say on this too. Now, with the policy that you're adding, what is it, 017?
0171.5.
Okay, under the current policy, it's 0170, duties is the policy, and we have a list of officers, which is 0171. And under that area, it's listing all officers, so it's given the description of the president, vice president, secretary, and treasurer. And the general would be under officers. And, I mean, I agree with the fact that there's a decision by all of the board members, but it's also in the general policy of authority under board members. I don't have a copy of it, but it's under authority, and it lists the powers, and it states that no one board member has any authority outside of the meeting other than in a board meeting with 7 board members. But also, at the same time, with the general addition that you're making, and not to pull on any of the confidential information in the attorney opinion, but there's a section under president duties, which is D, from 0170.71.1. It says perform other duties appropriate to the office of the president. And part of that, which was in discussion too, is if the superintendent happened to be laundering money or any collusion and something happens to the superintendent or other administrators, the board president would be contacted, and the board president would need to act quickly without an initial board meeting happen. So that falls under the perform other duties appropriate to the office of the president. And this is the law-driven policy under the Michigan Case Law 380.1221, which has these duties in it, and that's just from the revised school code, which says that these are just baseline case law, law-driven policy for this. So if it has perform other duties, and I'm just saying for conversation, if there is an emergency and the board president would take the lead and be able to contact the attorney. But I do understand that you don't want there to be frivolous expenses. So if we can agree to have something in the policy that states the 15 minutes can be addressed by the board president. It can't be each member of the board, but by the board president. And also in the event that there's a critical issue that arises between the superintendent, because the board president has to have oversight and ongoing meetings with the superintendent, but also lead the meetings and the board outside of, and that comes into play outside of the board meetings where we have the power. So that's just the 15 minutes. So I would agree to have the 15 minutes put into that, but the general terms that you have listed is already in the policies as our board authority.
I looked, I couldn't find anywhere where this language was redundant. If it is redundant, I don't see what harm it is. And the 15 minutes is just a policy of our current attorney. If that was to change, I wouldn't want to have something in the policy that's different. I mean, that doesn't stop somebody from doing that right now. The board president would be able to do that. But if our attorney's fee schedule changed or billing changed, then I would want that to be discussed. But that's not the case right now, and that wouldn't affect the board president's ability to contact the attorney for up to 15 minutes if this policy was accepted.
Okay, because in your wording, I think it says that the board president can't make
It says
any.
incur legal, in point of order, it says, as long as it doesn't incur legal charges, which at this point, under our current agreement, 15 minutes would not
Right,
incur legal
right.
charges, so therefore, the office of the presidency, whether it be you or anybody else, would have 15 minutes in case, in emergencies, I
Right.
believe, is that?
This is, Point of order.
Ms.
This is
Reed?
not my understanding with our current law firm. As I spoke with them before, as I sat as president, they said that across the board, every school board that they speak with, the only persons that they have contact with are the superintendent and the board president. And the board president can contact them with anything that they feel is necessary, as long as it is going towards, something in the district. Whether it goes past the 15 minutes or a meeting or something called out here, then you could ask for a quorum. But they were very adamant that they will only take calls from a president of a board. Otherwise, they're inundated with phone calls.
And then you run into other issues, like when we have a superintendent contract, there's other things that could come up. There's emergency issues that could come up that we can't fully gather for a board meeting, and that's why that's in place, just for those reasons. I mean,
And if for conversation's sake, Mr. Craig, is this, because I'm looking at 171.5 and I'm also looking at 155, has this been created to cut down on contact with with our legal group? Because we were, as a board, kept from that until about 2 years ago when we found out we were able to contact them. And two, are you trying to take away some of the authority that the president's chair has of this board?
I believe that's a perceived authority. I don't know that it's written anywhere. That's why this clarifies it. And no, it does not take away our ability to contact the attorney.
regardless, the president language here is in the revised school code, which is law-driven, so that can't be changed. And just by virtue of this being, the D being in there, performing other duties appropriate, that would be the president's call to do that, so.
I also don't feel that we can vote on a motion based on the guidelines of how a law firm works. Just like with the, 15 minutes of free time, how can we vote on something where if they're saying that they only want to speak with your board president, that's their, like, we agreed upon that when we took them on as our counsel.
This doesn't change that.
Then conversation was going back and forth, so that's just why I wanted clarification.
Yeah, that's, and with the D there, and with the discussion, and just outside of, let me make my point, with the attorney privileged information, just by our discussion, this is going to trump whatever, if it's an urgent issue seen by the board president, with whatever issues and oversight for the superintendent, especially with the new superintendent coming on board. Mr. Freitas.
I was just going to say that point D, performing other duties appropriate to the office of the president, is very ambiguous. It opens itself up to pretty much anything you want it to. So to say that that gives everybody the authority, I just think it's a reach.
Who said that?
No, it just, well, when you say, well, all other stuff is encompassed in that D, it's just, I think it's very
Say what I
ambiguous.
said?
I think,
Yeah.
and as a follow-up to that, Neil, I do agree with you, and we looked at this before, but the reason D is in there, perform other duties appropriate to the office of president, we follow what the state Department of Education says for us, and those might change all the time. So we could go in and change them all the time, or we could have gotten hold of our attorney and ask for their definition of each role, or you can be specific and say, as of right now, and then put the law in, but you'll have to be going back and changing it with our policy. So we can do that. You can be more specific on it, but I believe that when we had this in here, it was pretty much part of the boilerplate when we met with the gentleman from Neola, because he said these things are changing with the state a lot, so you have to kind of, it's one of those things where when you have a job description, at the end it says, and all other duties as assigned. And he put that in there because it's part of the boilerplate. So if we wanted to make that specific, it would be specific to our district.
Point
if
of
that
order,
helps.
the Department of Education doesn't have guidelines for board members. This comes from the school code, and that's law that's
Okay, the
passed by
school
the
code, that's what I
legislature.
meant, I'm sorry.
Right.
School code is what it goes by.
And getting back to your question or your comment, Neil, just based on the information that I had through discussion was that there needs to be an avenue open for board president in case of any emergencies or any kind of corruption that may occur, and they've seen it in other districts, and there's things that can happen. So there's got to be oversight. So they left that little, the policy is vague because you have to interpret it however you need it. But I mean, if you want to add something specific to the policy stating, come to the board with regard to just menial legal costs, that could, that's something different. The board can do that. It can set guidelines on how much an attorney is called, but if it's an urgent issue, that can be up for discussion too. So that's why I was pointing out that.
Okay.
And you could even change it to say based on, appropriate to the office of the school of president based on the Michigan school code, or Michigan's evolving school code.
Well, they have the Michigan case law under that policy. But, yeah, Mr. Craig?
I'll go ahead and make a motion that we add 0171.5 general to the policy as presented.
Any other discussion?
Point of order, there's a motion on the table.
I didn't know if there's any discussion that was completed, or anyone had anything else to add to it.
Is this anything different?
I think you need to, point of order, I think you need to call for a second, and then you
Right,
can
yeah, it's a
continue
red line
the,
version and
you
then
can make the final
Exactly the
comments
same.
before you vote.
Right, second.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Craig and a second
He did the
support.
same thing with this one.
I'll support
Aye.
for discussion purposes.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Craig and a support by Mr. Estheimer. Any discussion?
I'll just go to say, I don't think this contradicts any of the other policies that are here. I think it's appropriate. I don't think it handcuffs us in any way. It just makes sure that we act as a board, and that's why I brought this forward.
Can,
Mr. Estheimer?
Just speaking to my second here, and hearing this going back and forth, I tend to agree with Mr. Craig. It sounds as if there was an emergency, your hands wouldn't be tied, or whomever's sitting as president, they'd still be able to, get some advice legally, and then make an appropriate, if they had to call a meeting, a special meeting or something like that, it seems like that could still happen with this motion. I haven't been shown a different path as far as whether or not this ties the hands of our president.
And I personally don't have any, problems with it, other than the item that I mentioned, that it was in the duties area, and the fact that, whether you have that they're spelling it out, it should be known, and it is in the authority part of the policy, that not one board member can act alone, and we don't have any power unless we're in a full board meeting. So that kind of goes along with it. So if you want to agree to add that to it, I'm fine with that. Okay, any more discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, the second policy committee, 0155, Mr. Craig?
We've had some questions, again, as a board, as to how committees are created, added, removed. I went back through and I looked at the policy, and it referred to ad hoc committees, standing committees, but those were not identified anywhere. So, again, just to kind of clear up the discussion on how we act as a board, I think committees are another important part of that, and they're a reflection of us as a board as a whole, not of any one individual member. So that's why I proposed the modifications to 0155 on committees. Again, you have a red line version showing what the original was and where the modifications have been made, and then the second attached is a clean version where all of the track changes have been taken out, to come up with a new proposed policy.
Okay, any discussion?
Madam President,
Mr. Green?
as I looked through this today when it was sent late, and I don't know exactly how to handle this in a point of order, but we have two motions or two discussions on committees going on, and if we pass one, then talking about the second one is almost a moot point, in my opinion. The policy committee sat and agrees with, I agree, the policy committee, you and I agreed with Mr. Craig and I think we all did in our last work session, that the committee, the way it was worded was vague, it was confusing, and, we had to revisit it. I wish I would have stepped back and not voted to put this on action, because I think these are two things that probably should have been on a work session. I believe, without crossing over into the next committee, that there was a recommendation from the policy committee to create standing committees that was not specified, and still have ad hoc committees in the power of the president to see as needed. I personally like the fact of the second proposal that has the standing committees that cannot be changed by anyone, and that the ad hoc committee still should be somewhat in the hands of the president or any board member that would like to create one for the purpose, or if it serves its purpose. That's my opinion on seeing both of these together.
And part of my discussion is, Mr. Craig, you circumvented the committee, the policy committee that was working on these committee, the revisions, and is there a reason why you wanted to push it to action before the committee brought the recommendation to the board?
The original policy that we just approved, I had submitted to the policy committee 2 months ago, and I have not gotten a response back in any way from the policy committee.
The very last meeting, we pushed it to this when we put it on a work session, because we didn't have the time, we didn't have, for whatever reason, it was spelled out in the open meeting that it was going to be put in the work session, because me and Andy were the policy committee, working on the committees that we had given by you, and the committee, the other policy that we were working on with Mr. Pinkowski. So we were working on that collaboratively with the committee. This is the committee that we talked about with this particular policy, that we're making deliberations and recommendations to the full board. So today, on the last hour, you submit these items to the full board to put on the action item, telling the full board that you're going to put this on the action item, knowing that we had this already set for policy review in the work session before we brought it to action. Is there a reason why that you did that?
I didn't see this. You just distributed that after I sent mine.
But we have the policy review.
But you haven't distributed anything.
I
didn't know-
distributed it.
What I got was I got an agenda that says policy review.
Did
I
you
had
call
no
me? Did you
other-
ask me
I
a
got no-
question? Because we already had this discussion, and you knew we had the meeting the Thursday in the policy committee, because it is the committee that did the work for the revised, even yours. We talked about it in the last meeting.
Right.
And I said,
Madam President?
Yeah.
May I interrupt?
sure.
Can I make a motion that we table this so everybody on the board can look at both proposals? I mean, it just seems odd to me that we are going to have one committee, and if we vote on this and we pass it, then the recommendation from the policy committee really is null and void. And some of the stuff is the same about the wording of decisions and this and that. To me, I'm not saying I'm right, but I'll ask the will of the board that this is something that needs to be discussed and not voted on until 2 weeks to look at both sides and study it.
It's the proper channels that
I
we were
agree
even
with
voting
Mr.
on.
Green.
Point of order, I think the correct order on this is it is an action item, is that you need to propose the action item and second it, and then during the discussion, am I correct that then you can
Table it.
table it, or you can
You can table it. Once it's second, you can table it at any time.
If that's where you're going, I think as an action item, you've already approved this agenda. I think you have to make the motion and do the second, and then have the discussion, and then at that point, you can move to table it or not, and then that would be a vote also.
But point of order back is I think we are discussing this, and it's
Yeah.
getting a little out of hand. That's why it seems like it's getting a little out of hand, and that's why I'm making this proposal.
Well, what's getting out of hand is not what's proposed, it's the method in which it was proposed that was not liked.
Part of which the committee is,
But again, I will tell you that I received nothing from policy review until after I sent the email, then another email was sent. And as I'm looking at this, I don't know what's different from the original policy.
I can tell
okay,
you.
so I'm in favor of tabling with, only because I received it last minute myself, so I'm trying to look over everything real quick from what you sent me today.
And that's why it's here for discussion. And if there's any questions or concerns about it, again, it's laid out very clearly in red
You
what's
just brought it up
coming
too,
and
from what
going.
was sent to you. You said you didn't receive anything.
Right, correct. You sent yours out after mine. You were questioning as to why I brought it forward. I can answer one question at a time. I brought it forward
I'm
because I
giving you
didn't
one
know.
question at a time.
Point of order, I think we need to respect that when board members are speaking, they need the opportunity to complete their statement.
Well, from my position, we're having a conversation.
You asked why I brought it to the board for action, and I'm trying to explain that because I did not receive anything from policy review. I did not know what policy review was going to be discussed.
Okay,
And that's why I brought it to action. And I think that everything here is appropriate. I think it, again, represents us as a board rather than individuals, and that's why I've proposed the change.
Madam President,
Mr. Green?
I'm fine moving forward. I can say that if, again, I think we need to hear what everybody's opinion is. I can tell you that the major difference in the policy review is that there will be pure standing committees that the office of president or anybody else cannot change. Policy, anti-bullying, finance, curriculum. And then the ad hoc committees still can be brought from any board member or the office of president, and then the president does have the right, the office of the president has the right in those ad hoc committees, not the standing committees, just so you're aware of what the policy committee stated, to review if those ad hoc committees are still being effective or useful. I don't think in your proposal, in all honesty, I think we're taking away the president's right to have say-so in some ad hoc committees, and I do not think that the office of the president should be far and above anybody else's, as I just voted with everyone else for in the lawyer situation. But I do think that the office of president has to have some kind of autonomy in some of these ad hoc committees. That's my opinion. If this goes to a vote, I would support the second proposal that came out of committee and not the first.
Mr. Green, where in your proposal does it state about standing committees?
I know it's
Am I
not
missing
here.
it?
I do know that it's in the review notes that were sent to, from Dr. Pomponio to be
You were
posted.
citing that, and I just couldn't find it. so.
Okay, that's another reason why we need to table it, because it looks like we have board members that didn't get the information, and we need to give a full, complete, revised policy that we
With all
worked
due
on.
respect, the point of order on this is that we can't just say we're going to table it. We have to vote to table it. If we vote not to table it, then both of these bar and the agenda items that's already been approved, we will have to vote on them. So if we don't agree to table it for future discussion, then these two proposals are going to go forward.
Okay, and I also wanted to say that, Jason, on the work item, when you got your packet Friday, it said policy review. So if the information was put on Google Docs, or if it was sent to you, or if it was sent right after our committee meeting, and you didn't receive it, why didn't you let me know or let someone know that you didn't get that, because it is on the work session?
Right, we don't always receive information on the work session items. If they're presented by administration, we do. If they're put on by a board member, we do not always receive information with those.
So that's the reason why you circumvented the policy committee itself, just to put it on the action item, before our discussion?
I didn't submit it to the policy committee. I don't know that that's circumventing them.
Okay.
I don't know that there is a policy or rule that policy revisions need to go to the policy committee. Am I wrong? Is there a policy
Well,
that says that?
there is a chain of command and a point of order with, there's an organizational meeting that we set these goals, and we set aside what committees do what, and what the whole idea of the committee is, and what work they're supposed to do. We talked about this in the last meeting. We talked about it with this policy.
Right, the policy was to review the committee, or to review the policies.
Okay.
And I understand that, but it's several times now that you've made a claim that I am circumventing.
Well, you did. You did. It's the first time that I've ever seen somebody do that. My conversation's over. Let's go, move forward.
Madam President, may I have the floor?
Mr. Green?
I still, I'm going to make a motion, I'm going to make a motion about, for the discussion of committee, what number are we on? I lost my papers. 0171.1.
0155.
I'm sorry.
Craig.
You got the wrong one, I got the wrong one. 0155.
Correct. I'm sorry, I'm a bit confused on where we're at.
Need to
in
make
order
a,
here.
my angling, Mr. Coopser, is I'm going to try to make a proposal to follow the agenda, get a second, and then I will let you know that I'm going to make a motion after that point, at point of order, to table this discussion, so everybody has a chance to look at both committees' reports and remove both of these at this time. And if we don't, then we move forward and vote on both of them. That's where I'm trying to head. That's why I made the motion.
Okay. You have a
Can-
motion to...
A motion to what? I'm
You
sorry.
have to state the motion. I don't know what your motion is for.
You motioning to table that, or to...
Motion is to discuss.
Can I help? You would need
What's the
to
motion?
move that, move to accept the revision 0155 as submitted by Mr. Craig. And then there would be a second, and then you can discuss it, and then at that time, you can make a motion to table it. I believe I'm telling you the correct procedure for this.
Yeah, that follows the agenda, that's the correct procedure.
So we have to accept the revision, but we're not agreeing to
You
it.
have to make a motion and a
Then have
second,
the
and then the
discussion
vote will
after.
determine.
Okay.
Okay.
I make a motion that we accept revision 0155, policy revision from Mr. Craig.
Support.
Okay, any discussion?
Madam President,
Mr. Green?
I make a motion that we table,
We have to vote on that?
yep, I make a motion that we table.
I mean, don't we have to vote on this as a first and a second? We need to
No.
vote, no?
No,
I can
because he
table
wants to
this, and
table
then I
it.
can table the second one.
Got it.
Or somebody can, not I. I make a motion that we table policy 0155, policy revision from Mr. Craig.
Support?
Is that Mr. Freitas? Okay.
Are you going to state how long you're going to place it on the table?
I can't quantify it. That's against Robert's rules.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Green and a support by Mr. Freitas to table this action item. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
No, opposed.
So there's 5.
And a roll call.
Oh, can I have a roll call, please? Thank you.
Mr. Estheimer?
Yes.
Mr. Craig?
No.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Mr. Freitas?
Yes.
Got me all screwed up here. Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Dr. Pomponio?
Yes.
Mr. Coopser?
No.
Okay, motion to table passes. Moving on to the next action item. Do we need a date? We don't need a date on that.
You can't quantify
Okay.
a date.
Moving on to action item 3. That is the committee's revised policy 0155.
I think you're on action item number 4, aren't you?
Yes.
Okay, action item number 4.
Same thing. You have to say action item 4, and then the committee that's proposed by you.
Okay.
Or by however you want to word it, how it was approved.
Okay, action item number 4, we have policy 0155, committee, policy for committees. This is a revised committee policy that was recommended by the committee
By
policy.
you. The agenda said by you, by Dr. Fontaine.
Okay. Policy revision by myself, Dr. Pomponio.
Madam President,
Mr. Green,
I make a motion that we accept. What's that?
She just read the item and he's making it.
Thank you.
I make a motion that we accept policy 0155, policy revision from Dr. Pomponio.
I'll second.
okay, I have a motion and support. Any discussion?
Madam President, I'd like to table that discussion. Or I'd like to table that,
You make a motion to table that? Okay.
Second.
Mr. Estheimer. Okay, have a motion by Mr. Estheimer to table the policy 0155, revision by Dr. Pomponio. And did I say second by Mr. Green? Okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, moving on to action item number 5. That is policy 2432, athletic logos by Dr. Pomponio. Discussion. This was a policy that was put together in collaboration with Mr. Pankowski, the athletic director, Anderson. He gave us a presentation about logos and some confusion about various sports logos, processes, and who approves what logo. And the athletic director had some concern about, what was being put on the jerseys and what he had approval of, and how any discussion or protocols for which he got those recommendations to have, or permission to have those logos put on the jerseys. So we created the logo, which is stemming from another policy, 2431. And the athletic logo policy is work that was from the athletic director himself, so he knows what is happening with this particular process. So I have it written down in this policy, 2432. Do you want me to read it, or do you want to just, okay. Any questions on the language?
Madam
I have
President?
one, I'm sorry.
Ms. Reed?
I just had a question. This, just for clarification, this doesn't mention anything about orders or items that are purchased for sale in the school store. And when Mr. Pankowski did his presentation, he threw out a couple logos and designs that he either didn't like or didn't feel were appropriate. So are we going to also incorporate a standard of what is on our items that we sell through the school store?
Well, part of this policy is that all uniform orders and purchases must obtain athletic department approval prior to ordering.
So I have some comments on that. First, that will cause a problem if the expectation is that the athletic director is going to approve all of the other orders from any other group, including the school store. That's you're far beyond the scope of the expectations of the athletic director for that. And there are, now this goes to your school store, your PTO, your band, everybody else who sells Titan wear that may not comply with this. I know I have already a concern about the way this policy is written, because one of the things that isn't in there is like Titan football, Southgate softball. We already have, we're in conversation right now with the pads on the new backstop. And I know that the softball team has one proposal in there for it to say Southgate softball, and that's not included in here. So I guess I want to make sure, I didn't see this before tonight, and so I'm not sure that, I know that Mr. Pinkowski gave you what he currently was doing. I'm not sure if that includes everything, or if we're already going to, does this say that we should never, on a uniform, say the name of the team? And if that's okay, I'm just concerned that you would want to add this in. I don't disagree with this policy, but I don't know that it's been vetted among all of our groups to make sure that we're not forgetting something that we would want included in here. But I do have a concern about the name of the team being allowable.
And that's part of the package, or the reason why we wanted to have it in the work session, but Mr. Ostheim.
We may have to go around this the same way before, because this needs to be a
Yeah,
work session, in my
yeah.
opinion. I'll make a motion to approve this policy.
A second.
Okay, I have a motion to approve policy 2432 and a support by Mr. Green. Any discussion?
Yes, I'd like to make a couple points as I was looking at the athletic logo policy that was presented as it is. From what I've seen in here, it looks like I have some problems with it in terms of, and I appreciate the work that's been done by the policy committee as well as Mr. Pinkowski in efforts to try and wrangle in the ideas of what is acceptable and not acceptable within the athletic logos. What I've got in here is what it appears is that there's 4 different variations that are unoriginal at best, that defines the STA, which is taking from the Texas A&M logo. It talks about the Alabama A, and then it also talks about the Tennessee Titans sword. It seems as though we're borrowing logos and styles from other teams. I think it dilutes the brand equity of the district as well as the Titans that are of Southgate. I think that there's also language in here that says allows for various scripts on select uniforms. I find that it's giving a very broad brush to put into a policy allowing what are the current practices being used on uniforms, which isn't exactly a policy itself. I would like to see that as we move forward as it relates to this, is that there's a style guide that's created and that our policy is to direct people to that style guide in reference to how they should be creating and supporting our brand equity, and how they should be using that in various applications of our branding and sub-branding, being it to schools, being it to other organizations, be it to athletic logos, be it to the district itself.
Mr. Koopser, when Mr. Pinkowski submitted this, he did not intend for that first paragraph to become policy. The intention was to describe what was currently happening. So your point is well made.
I just want to complete my thought on this. Given everything you said, that's the reason why this belongs back in work session. It's something that we need to work through, so I'd like to make a motion to table this.
A point of order, I don't think we need to table it to get it back to the work session. There's a motion on the table, it could fail for lack of support, and at that point, it could, I think this is an unfinished product. If you table this, you're bringing this unfinished product back. You don't get to take the unfinished product, polish it up, and bring it back. That's the difference between the other two. We have 2 completed things that we have to weigh one or the other. This is an unfinished product that maybe needs to just fail, and then you can bring it back. It can go on a work session, and then you can bring it back after that. But I think if you table it, you're bringing back this same unfinished product.
Madam President, point of order.
Ms. Reed?
In addition, I do think, I agree with what Mr. Kupser had said, that I think that there is a difference between our brand and our athletic logos. I think under our brand, it needs to be pretty specific. Like I know that our burgundy is color 222. We should know what our silver is. We should know what that looks like. So when it comes to our brand, those things that should be outlined. And then when it comes to athletic logos, I think that there does need to be more work on it. But I believe that we need to have two separate things. One is our brand and one is our athletic logos.
I'll remove my motion, but I would ask that you call the question.
Okay, so am I making a motion to have it approved first?
The
and then we're
the
going to-
motion has been made to approve it, it's
Okay.
been supported.
Okay.
If it doesn't have support, then it'll die for lack of support.
Okay, so I'm gonna, okay. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed?
No.
Opposed. Roll call, please. Let's go through the process.
Mr. Coopser?
No.
Mr. Green?
No.
Mr. Freitas?
No.
Ms. Reed?
No.
Mr. Estheimer?
No.
Mr. Craig?
No.
Dr. Pomponio?
No. A motion fails, and we can bring it back to the committee. We'll take it back to the committee.
Madam President, I know that the discussion was a little uncomfortable, but I still want to make the point that this might be exactly the kind of thing that would be appropriate for an ad hoc committee. This is a pretty big conversation, and there's a lot of parts to this. It's about athletics, it's about Titan wear, it's about school store,
Branding and-
it's about branding, it's about all of that. And I would suggest that this would be exactly the kind of thing that the board might consider for an ad hoc committee to get input from a lot of people. Trying to just resurrect this over and over again on a work session and not having other voices on it is probably going to be a frustrating venture for the board.
Thank you. Thank you. Moving on to employee representatives, there's seeing none. Moving on to information and announcements from the board.
Yes, Madam President, I have a few dates really to go over for the two schools that I'm liaison for. First would be Shelters. They have a fun event coming up that I'll highlight first. The PTO is putting on called the Boo Bash, and that's October 20th from 6:30 to 8:30. It's an annual event, otherwise known as the Harvest Fest. It's on a Friday night. It's a wonderful family fun night. Trick-or-treating, spooky hallway, pumpkin decorating, craft music. I'll be there. So it should be a fun night. You can dress up in the Halloween costume, bring the family. Admission's free. And then also, they have a PTO meeting on the 12th at 6:30 p.m. Their PTO book fair is the 16th through the 20th, and then the parent-teacher conferences are going on in Ford Line and Shelters the 19th and the 20th, and that's a half day. That's a Thursday and Friday. That's the 11:30 a.m. dismissal, and that's all I have for Shelters. And then coming up at Ford Line, they also have a PTO meeting coming up on October 12th at 3:30 in the library. They do have childcare in case you bring kids. They have a place that they can be watched. And then that's all that I have for you, because I was going to repeat the information about the early dismissal, but I already covered that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Escamilla. Any other announcements from the board? Mr. Green?
Just Grogan Elementary School, one of the schools that I represent, had a PTO meeting tonight, which I was there for a few minutes. Having a movie night this Friday, October 13th, Friday 13th, which is Boss Baby. Everybody is invited.
Halloween costume, right?
What, Boss Baby, my Halloween costume? Yeah. That's funny. I was gonna be Captain Underpants, actually.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Parent-teacher conference is also Thursday, October 19th. Two different sessions in the afternoon, which of course is a half-day then for the students also. Their book fair will be the following week, which is October 23rd to 27th, and Friday, October 27th is their Oktoberfest. So a lot of things going on at Grogan, and I have not touched base with Asher, and I will do that this week and report on that in a couple of weeks, so. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other information or announcements? Okay, seeing none, moving on to work session. First one is transportation request for proposals. Mrs. McLaughlin?
Our current vendor for providing transportation services in the district is Trinity Transportation. We started out back in 2014 with a 3-year contract, and in June of 2016, the end of that contract, the board approved a 2-year extension. So the 2017-18 year is the second year of that 2-year extension, and at the time of the extension, I committed to the board that we would do a RFP for our transportation services. So even though it's only October, it really is time to get started on this. When we did the RFPs for our custodial grounds and maintenance, we had the assistance of Plant Moran, which I would like to use again. I think they provided a great service to us, making sure everything was covered and all the procedures were followed. I had an initial conversation with them, and they're the ones that said, we really should get started very soon to give us the best opportunity for responses. So I also recognize the fact that one of the board's goals concerns transportation. And, if with using, if I'm going to go ahead and proceed with using Plant Moran, even if I wasn't, we have to get information together in order to create the RFP, and we have to give guidelines. So I can start with what we currently have, but if there's additional services that the board would like to have considered in the RFP, I'm going to need that information pretty quickly. Not tonight, but it does need to, be considered and maybe discussed at the next meeting as well. But a listing of anything additional than what we have. So right now, we use them for all of our special ed transportation, both on buses and sedans. We use it for transportation for our voc ed program to DCTC and Wyandotte Hospital. We also use it for charters for our athletics, and there's some various groups throughout the district that use Trinity for some of their field trips.
Madam President?
Ms. Reed?
Just a couple questions. For the RFP or RFA that's going out, is there a way for us to take a look at that to see how it's written now, if there's anything, because I don't want to be redundant?
Right.
And then in prior years, I know we had like 4 companies that came in, and they all got to do a presentation in front of the whole board or anyone who wanted to be that. Will we be able to do that again this year, even with Plant Moran? I know that was maybe a one-time thing because it was when we were outsourcing, but could we do that again?
We can. I know we did it the last time because that's when the district went to 100% outsourcing.
Right,
And that was, and any decision that the board make is a big decision, but that was a very key decision. It would have to, it could, usually when there's a process, they can be looked at, and then part of what Plant Moran does is it looks at the RFPs and recommends the top 3. But certainly if the board would like to look at the RFPs at the same time, and then we can communicate with what the recommendation is for they usually go with the top 3. We can definitely, there's some latitude with how we can proceed.
And just for the interest of the board, when we did this before, it was really nice because we had everybody's, their response, and then they had a presentation, and we were able to clarify and ask specific questions, and it really helped us because we were between 2, and I feel like that meeting that we had when we got to ask the questions and interact is what led us to make our decision, so.
Right, and if the whole board meets, we just have to post it as an open meeting when we do the interviews, and we did that before.
Okay, Mr. Craig?
Is it Plant Moran or Plant Moran Cressa?
Plant Moran.
Plant Moran?
Yes.
And then what do they charge for that? I'm sure they don't.
She gave me an estimate of $12,900.
$12,900?
Our cost, actually, it was a cost not to exceed.
Are there other firms that do that? Do all the accounting firms?
Not all the accounting firms do it. They have the best reputation for that service. And we did use them for the custodial grounds and maintenance, and I think everyone was very happy with what they contributed to the process and getting us through and making a decision.
Thank you.
So it was Plant Moran to do the vetting when we did the privatization of the transportation at that time?
Did they, last time?
They brought us the vendors.
No.
they
The
helped us-
superintendent at the time brought the vendors to the board.
Okay, so now, where does the 12,900 come in?
That's the fee for Plant Moran to prepare the, given, based on information I give them, to prepare the RFP, put out the notices, when they're due, they take the proposals and review all of them. Depending on how many we get, then they would make the recommendation for the top 3 or 4.
So otherwise, we did this ourselves the first time. That was through us?
You know, I feel, what was it? And tell me if I'm wrong. There was something that we put out the RFP, you collected everything. We vetted them based on 5 points, price point. You brought it to the finance committee, and we said, we're narrowing it down to the 3 most inexpensive. When we brought them in, and then you did their background checks, because it was like the best background checking we've heard.
Okay.
You background checked, and then you called a secondary background check.
Right.
Was that something that we paid for, or?
No, that was actually for our auditing services.
Right,
And I did that myself. That's a little smaller scale.
okay.
And I did that myself. I used some samples that Michigan school business officials have, tried to put the best of all the samples together and did the RFP. This is a much bigger scope, just like the custodial grounds and maintenance. And I feel it's worth the process of working with Plant Moran, especially since the last time it was us picking 3 companies, and then I
Right.
think the union also did their proposal. That way, we get a broader scope of companies that could possibly bid on it as well.
Madam President, if I can give some historical perspective, originally when the district privatized the custodial services, that was done, the district did it on their own. And the risk of doing it on your own is that you don't think of all the things that you need to put in the call, in the call for proposals. And that is in fact what happened. And so when the first private company was hired, we ended up without a contract, with sort of a marked up binder of proposals, and there were many, many things that were forgotten or underestimated in terms of what we would need from a private company. So then that was probably one of the biggest reasons why we wanted to use a company like Plant Moran, because they are the expert in developing and looking at your needs. They help you better provide the information that you need to the companies that are going to bid on that. I wasn't in the district when the decision was made to eliminate much of the busing, but again, that was done, I'm sure, as a cost savings measure by the district. The company that was chosen, I don't think there's any inherent difficulties with the company, but there were surprises. There were things that we hadn't asked, and there were questions about, well, now what about this route? What about that route? And I think you do better when you use an expert firm in a district this size, when there's not a lot of people that work for the district that have expertise in developing those requests for proposals. Additionally, I had a conversation with Ms. McLaughlin, because if the board is considering getting additional proposals, if you want a proposal for something other than just existing transportation services, we absolutely need the help of someone else, because that would be, okay, then what else would you like us to get pricing on? We no longer have a bus fleet. How would that work? Would you want to, would we seriously consider expanding our transportation, and to what grade levels? We've reconfigured our district. We have no knowledge on bus routes or how many we would need. And in this case, the district absolutely needs the assistance of another firm to help us put this proposal together. And that's, I think, what Ms. McLaughlin is the message to the board is, this is one of your board goals, and we're going to need some additional input from the board pretty quickly about what else, if anything, might go on that transportation request.
Madam President,
Yes,
and
ma'am.
Teresa, as a follow-up to that, as Ms. Cretion said, it is one of our board goals. Jason has brought this up many times for us to review transportation options. So would it be possible if you are to send us the RFP, we review that, and we ask for 2 proposals? One based on what we're currently doing, which is our federally mandated in athletics, and then another with some of the questions that this board has based on bringing it back, how much that would cost. We have projections to not only meet that goal, but to take a look and see what the prospect is for us to be, and if it's going to be anything in the near future.
I was just gonna-
Would that be
So
feasible?
we don't have an RFP template for transportation.
Okay.
I can discuss this with Plant Moran and see if they will do 2 versions.
Could we review what was sent out last time? Do we still have that?
I
Use that
believe
maybe as a boilerplate?
I'll double check my files, but to the best of my knowledge, there isn't anything. It was the former superintendent making phone calls to certain companies.
Okay.
So,
Then I would suggest maybe a special meeting for us to maybe come up with those questions as quickly as possible for Teresa, to be added to, we know that this is the RFP for what we have now. In addition, this board would like to know these questions.
Couldn't Plant Moran help us develop those? I mean, that's part of what we would be paying
Yeah,
them for.
right.
Is to develop that.
yeah.
That's part of what we'd be paying them for, is to develop that RFP. And
Mm-hmm.
as long as they know what we're thinking, they can put that in the RFP and get prices for it. There's no cost associated with
Right.
getting a price
That would fit.
for
I'm
for
pretty sure that
services.
Plant Moran would come to a board meeting and have a conversation with you about their services and what that encompasses, and how, and listen to the thoughts of the board and try to put something together.
I think that would be very good for an open public meeting.
It sure
too.
would.
So, yeah, I think that's a great idea if we could do that.
Okay.
And you don't need our approval to contract with Plant Moran.
No.
That's a small enough amount that you don't need our.
It's small enough that
Right.
I can proceed. But I
And-
wanted you to know the direction I would,
Sure.
Would we be able to get that on a upcoming meeting then, before the end of the year?
I can't imagine that Plant Moran is not available for one of our meetings before December, the end of
Okay.
December.
Right, so we have the audit report at the next meeting, and we have,
Well, I'm going to talk about the calendar
okay,
in just a
and
minute,
so we need the calendar, so.
That's next up.
Jumping ahead.
So I would like to hopefully maybe have that meeting sometime in November.
Okay.
So,
I'd be in favor of an extra meeting if that had to happen.
Would we need an extra meeting, or just to have them come to the board meeting?
We don't know yet. We have to give us a chance to talk to Plant Moran and see what we can do.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Ms. McLaughlin.
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, work session number 2, Board of Education calendar and director reports. Mrs. Cretion?
So I have given you the most recent board calendar, and this is going to be an ever-changing document. So I will continue to put this in your Google folder and in your hard copy folder as I add things. So I have now added the director reports that you had requested, I believe, this summer. And so those are on there. Everyone is on there once, and I know there was some thought at one time about having them be here more than one time. As I begin to populate this calendar, I would not recommend that, because you know the amount of business that we tend to conduct anyway. So the director reports are on there going forward. Unless there's a change in the calendar, you should expect those those persons to show up, and you had asked for the opportunity to submit questions to them ahead of time. So I think the board needs to watch the calendar and be sending your questions. I think you had agreed that you would send forward your questions to the board president, who would forward those to the superintendent, who would forward those to whatever director that is. They have been told that they are going to talk about their current state of affairs, what their successes are, and what their challenges are. Any specific questions or specific information, you would need to request that. So that's on there. I am also currently working on student groups during student representative, when a variety of groups can come. The calendar is already starting to be populated. I know we have someone for the 24th. I did not bring that. I don't recall off the top of my head. They have been instructed that they have in the vicinity of 3 to 5 minutes, and that we really do not want PowerPoint presentations. They are coming to share the good news about what's going on with their particular group, their particular building. The exception to that is the JROTC presentation, which is a part of their curriculum. So we grant them some additional time because that whole presentation is part of their expected curriculum. And again, I haven't added that yet, but they do have a date, and that is one group who has more time than 5 minutes, and they do bring a PowerPoint presentation. So I will get more of those added as we go. And again, you should watch every month when you get your board packet information, because I'll be adding things to the calendar. So we're on a roll for the two things that you had talked about this summer.
Was that something that you found out that was recent? Because I was looking forward to the JROTC because they do a presentation, and you said that they couldn't have more than the 5 minutes. I've reconsidered because it is a part of their curriculum, and we had a good conversation. What happened last year is the colonel made a request very late, and a half an hour at that point in time for the meeting that he wanted was not going to be possible. And he didn't feel like he could do the curricular requirement justice in less than 30 minutes. So we weren't able to do that last year. So he's ready to come back. I want to say it's a December meeting, but it's in another folder. I still think that 30 minutes is a bit long with the amount of board business, so that'll be up to the board to have that conversation with the colonel if you want to try to limit him at all. But it is a part of their curriculum. Thank you.
And we love the presentation.
Yes. Okay, number 3, millage spending, transportation proposal for student activities, Mrs. Creation.
When Mr. Pinkowski was here and there was a discussion about increasing the athletic budget, part of which would be used to enhance the transportation support that the district gives to the different athletic teams, several board members asked some questions about, well, what about some of the other groups? So I did limit my questions, which were sent out to all of the building administrators. I did not put field trips on there, or one-time events. I asked for what groups are truly sponsored by the district and competing or represent the district, and these came back to me. There were a couple of others, but they have other funding. They don't need money. They're fine. They were all okay. So these were the ones that I was able to identify. One, because the board had questioned it, was JROTC. Their transportation costs, now that they are part of the DCTC consortium, all of their costs are covered through added cost funds. So there's nothing that they fundraise for in terms of transportation. So that leaves Quiz Bowl, robotics, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, and band. 3 of those compete on behalf of the district. Big Brothers Big Sisters is a long-standing supportive mentoring program that I do consider to be a district approved activity. It's not a one-time field trip. So they have all submitted information about the costs of their transportation and some of the some of the costs associated with competing, some of their entrance fees. I put those together and tried to come up with a total cost that they're fundraising for and some equitable amount of money that the board could consider coming from millage money to support those organizations. And that's what I'm recommending. And again, this is one of those millage conversations that doesn't require a formal vote, but rather a conversation and a consensus. And it totals $5,000 annually, and I would be recommending that this continue through the life of this enhancement millage to be determined for renewal at the future, and at any time, any of the things that the board has supported, that the district is supporting through millage funds, were we to have a change in the direction of our finances, all of those things can obviously always be reduced or eliminated. So I guess it's for questions now from all of you.
Madam President,
Mrs. Reed?
Ms. Cretion, on this form, all transportation costs are covered through DCTC as this program is now included in the consortium. Is that as of this school year?
Last year it also was.
The cadets were not provided transportation to any of their competitions.
This is the information that I got from the colonel. This was his response to me.
Okay, but just to be clear, because I have kids that have been in the program for 5 years, so transportation was not available, and the kids have to scramble to get there however they can, so just to be clear on that.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you, Mrs. Cretion.
I'm sorry, Madam President.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, thank you.
Mr. Cooper.
So your recommendation is that this would be a support of the $5,000 annually to cover the Quiz Bowl, robotics, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and band transportation, as you described. How does that occur now? Do we have to take that to an action item? I don't think it was before. Are you saying that's what you're going to start doing?
No,
And when-
I'm just saying that I'm just proceeding, that I bring these items to you, you have a conversation, and what we've done in all of them has been a general consensus head nod. Go ahead.
Unless we yell no, she's going to do it.
Or no,
Right.
or we want Mr. Pinkowski to come back and give us additional information.
My point is, I want us to discuss whether or not we're giving you a head nod right now and to move forward with it, since it doesn't have to go to an action. Can you get that direction? And I'm supporting of it as well. I'd like to hear from the rest of the
I
members.
can give the direction. Okay, would the board give a yes or no if you're supporting it for Mrs. Cretion? Neil?
Before, to dovetail off of that, before we do this, and because it doesn't say it, do we want to be specific for the life of the millage? Because in the past, when we know that we want to support something for the entirety of the renewal of the millage, it just says from millage money.
And I think this would be reflected in the minutes, much like the curriculum, maintenance, and athletic budgets that supported, that language will appear in the minutes, that the understanding was that could continue, that we would budget for that on an annual basis through the life of the millage.
Thank you for that
Okay.
clarification.
Thank you. Mr. Freitas?
Yes.
Mr. Estheimer? Mr. Green?
Absolutely.
Yes. Mr. Craig?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mrs. Reed?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. You have our full support, Mrs. Cretion.
Thank you. There are some people that are going to jump over the moon over this one because they work really hard to get this money, so I will get that information to them. Just another general comment about the millage spending. I won't have anything on the next meeting. My intention at this point is at the end of October, we're going to have a better idea of where we are budget-wise, so it will in all likelihood be November before I would be bringing back, there's still a couple $100,000 undesignated of the millage money, and I'm going to continue to keep that on hold until we can get more of our budgetary information and see where we are. We've been trying to be real cautious of the last couple $100,000. That's especially possible with the addition of the maintenance money. Mr. Lay has been able to start addressing a few other things that are on that wish list through maintenance money. So I don't have anything else pressing. I just wanted to let you know that I will put this back, this will come back on the agenda in November.
And can,
I'm
I'm sorry. Can Mr. Lay give us some kind of, maybe an update through the Grounds and Maintenance Committee on that? Like periodically, what he's spending on?
So the director, on the December, he's coming in December to do.
Okay.
It's on the, right, facilities report. Would
Yeah.
that be him, November 14th?
Yeah, so specific questions that you might want to give him. He and I talked, and we specifically put him on for November, hoping that that could be a little bit of, we're closing out construction for this year, and these are some of the things that I have started spending the maintenance money afforded to me on.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. Mr. Coopser?
Thank you, Madam President. As it relates to the millage spend, and we talked within the Finance Committee as it related to transparency, related to that on being presented on the board website. I was curious if we had gotten anywhere with that at all.
We haven't had a finance committee meeting in a while, and that was going to be part of the work of the finance committee to develop that template and that dashboard and to monitor that. So if the finance committee is not going to meet in the future, then we need to have a conversation about whose responsibility that's going to be and what it's going to look like.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, moving on to draft of board goals. I didn't receive any additional goals that were added to what was already presented. So we don't have a full board input yet for the board goal discussion. So we're gonna have to move that. I'm still missing a couple board members. So can we move that to another work session?
I believe, Madam President,
Mr. Coopser?
I believe that we were agreeing that drafts would be due today, and that's just that, not that we were really going to discuss them, just kind of or were we going to discuss what
They're
drafts
supposed to be
were?
sent to me, and then I was
Sent
supposed to put
you as
it
well.
together in a full document, but that's okay, just,
Okay, thank you.
So for clarification, you have not received all the drafts.
Right.
So this is a reminder to get the drafts, because especially if you want to all have copies of them and have them be in the Google folder, if
Right.
Dr. Pomponio gets them and forwards them to me, then I can make sure that they're available to you in both of those formats. And then I would move this to the work session for 10/24.
okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to number 6, or new number 5, attorney opinion. That's actually now void because we had the part of the discussion with the items that were tabled, so that's no longer on the work session right now. And moving on to finance committee, we had a discussion per the committee regarding the new revisions, and that relates to it, so that would be in the table discussion as well, so we need to put that back.
So as one more point of clarification, you tabled several items and you removed things from the work session. So they will reappear on an agenda at the place that you like them when I hear from one of you or the
Okay.
board president.
I'll let you know, thank you. Mr. Coopser?
I'm sorry. Can I ask as it relates to, I know that what we had tabled as it related to policies related to the committees themselves, was the work item itself to discuss whether or not there should or should not be a finance committee? Or is it to discuss the policy itself as it relates around the finance committee? Because I would expect that we would default to the existing policy as it relates to whether or not the board as a whole, I think that's how it says that the board as a whole can vote whether or not there should or shouldn't be a policy. And I think that's the defaulted
Well,
policy as
we
it is.
needed clarification. I mean, I personally do want to bring it back, but we have to get clarification through the wording of the policy that we were working on through the revisions, because it was unclear.
But, Madam President, what Mr. Coopser's saying though, and then as
Based on the old
he,
policy.
as of now, since there has not been changes, he is correct that the existing policy is still in place. Nothing has changed. Nothing's been suspended.
Right, so that's where we had the,
So my question is
diverse.
that in the existing policy, the way I understand it, is that the board can vote on it as a whole, whether or not this policy, or this committee needs to exist. So my question is that in the work item that you have here, is it to discuss whether or not, as a board as a whole, for us to determine whether or not the finance committee should or shouldn't exist?
Actually, I put it on there in conjunction with the committee policy, but the intent was to bring it back if the committee was passed. I mean, and to put it up there and talk about it and say that that's what we discussed as a standing committee. But if you want to put it out there, I mean, can we vote on something right now?
This isn't a vote.
Right, we can't.
This is a
we can't.
discussion.
So that all ties in with the,
At this point in time, we have suspended the Finance Committee and we haven't met. And as came up tonight, there are expectations of some work to be done in that Finance Committee that are just on hold, and it's been on hold for quite some time. I know that even the way we have in the past presented the audit information has had to go a different route. So I guess I'm asking, is there any reason at this point why the Finance Committee, I mean, is the Finance Committee continue to be suspended? Is it able to meet? I'm looking for some direction on that, too.
well, since I was the one who placed it on a suspension, there was confusion on what the interpretation of that policy was, but the idea here was to unsuspend it and bring it back. That's what the discussion was going to be about. But I didn't have that discussion because we had to suspend the policies.
No, we haven't suspended the policies.
Or
We
the
absolutely can
work
have,
on the-
if that was the intent, we absolutely can have that discussion.
So, if I might,
Mr. Craig?
Yeah, my understanding is that was the question as to why the committee's policy had gone back to the policy committee, because there was an understanding, and again, if I'm wrong, I did miss the meeting, that there's a belief that the president believes she has authority to suspend or disband committees.
I didn't have the belief, that was our practice.
So I was,
But I think that's what the crux of where the conversation about committee policy came and
That's
started.
right.
And I don't know that that's been addressed in what the policy committee has put forward, so.
It
so I-
was.
It absolutely was addressed,
It
and I
was. We
said
had
that
the work,
twice, is
yeah.
that a standing committee, one of the standing committees will be finance.
Right, that's what we
Absolutely, I said that
discussed.
earlier tonight.
So
But
finance
we
can.
tabled that.
But that doesn't answer the question, does the president have the authority to
May-
suspend or
Mr. Green.
remove
No, let
committees?
him finish. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed it. Say it again, please.
That doesn't answer the question as to does the president have the authority to disband or
It-
suspend committees?
I believe I said it, maybe I did not, and I don't know why the documents weren't sent out. The recommendation from the policy committee was that there would be 4 standing committees that cannot be dissolved by any office, including the president, without the approval of the full board.
Right. That was
Point
in
of
our-
order, I don't believe the document that was sent
That
out
was not
says that.
produced.
I don't remember seeing that
Right,
either.
and that was probably on my part when I sent it through emails. That was the big issue here.
Yeah.
He didn't get
That was what was discussed in the policy committee.
Yeah.
Are there minutes to that effect?
if I can kind of cut through that piece of it, my question is does the board as a whole think that there should be a finance committee or not? And I guess that's what I'm trying to figure out here. And whether or not authority to cancel or not, I think it's the will of the board is what should rule here in terms of, do we as a board think there should be a finance committee? If there is, let's reinstitutionalize it and continue to work forward. And getting into the semantics of what that policy states or not, it's always allowed for the board to rule as a whole. So my question is really, do we think we should have, and that was what my question was at the time, is that I would like to ask the board what their opinion was on that. And that's what I'm asking. Do we want to have a finance committee as a whole, as a board? What is our thoughts on that? And
Okay,
if
I wanna
that's it.
address it. Mr. Koopser, we had to discuss this in the committee because when we initially talked about it, when I brought it to the board, I said there were things happening in the finance committee that were being voted on that was apart from the rest of every other committee. And that's why I said, because each item that was brought to that committee was being brought directly to the full board. The full budget amendment, the full budget proposal, everything was brought, the same thing, but the other thing that I brought as I don't know, point of contention is the fact that there was decisions being made in that committee different from other committees, so we had to bring it to the policy committee to review and that's where the whole sticking point started with the committee revision. So, but we already had that discussion.
Point of order, we have not, I guess it's a point of order, because this is informal debate, that hasn't come to the full board yet. That there has not been a board discussion about whether or not the finance committee should exist.
Right.
That's-
And Madam President, I mean, to answer Mr. Cooper directly, absolutely, I believe there should be a finance committee. And I do believe that, and again, just my opinion, I do believe that there are certain committees that our committee guidelines, which is this big debate right now, are very vague. And it was my proposal and I'll put it out there, in the policy committee, that we stipulate 4 standing committees that are always there, that no one officer, including the office of the president, has a right to absolve. And the finance committee was one of them, curriculum, policy, and bullying. That was my recommendation to be discussed. And so to answer your question, I absolutely believe there should be a finance committee.
And that was what it was in our revision.
Point of order.
Mrs.
So
Reed?
Perhaps the discussion that needs to be made is not should it be a committee, but how should the committee act and work and run? And I say this because having been on the finance committee for a few years and then going off to get on another, one of the reasons why I left finance committee is there's a lot of redundancy. Like when you talk about, we have the budget reports, we would sit, hear the whole budget report, and then again, Teresa would reiterate all of it to the entire board. There wasn't any decisions made, there wasn't any acting. There would be decisions if Teresa came to us and said, here are 5 vendors, which 3 do you want brought to the board? What changed was it seemed like the new finance committee was making decisions that were put into place that were not brought before the entirety of the board. Because there had been times where a decision maybe was made, and when it came to the board, someone had said, well, why was that decision made? Or when we looked at it, can we rethink this? So I think that maybe the committee had changed a bit and how it worked from my perspective. And I think from yours as well, because
Yeah.
this, you were on it for the first time, but you know how it worked before. So maybe that's the discussion, not should it be there, but how should it run?
May I address?
Mr. Green.
Ms. Reed? I agree with you 100%. I think the contention, though, is the wording of how it was interpreted, because the wording on it, which I think is in both proposals, I think if everybody looks at them once they get them, both proposals, I believe, have the wording that that changes that first paragraph, which Mr. Koopser questioned before because he was confused on the wording, because the wording says that committees have a right to make recommendations / decisions. And so that becomes very confusing because
Right.
it gives you that opportunity. It says you can make decisions in that wording, and I don't know if that should be in there.
That's
So I
quite
agree with you.
sophomoric, because you can't make a decision without a quorum, and a committee is of 3. So that language does need to change.
That's why I removed it, if you review my.
Well,
part,
they've been
I
removed in both.
removed that
They were
word.
removed,
Right.
so I agree with what you're
Because-
saying, and I hear what Jason's saying.
Because committees
Personally,
shouldn't make decisions.
right. Personally, if we were making a decision right now, to get back to Ms. Creason, because there needs to be work done, I don't know the policy about the interpretation, but the fact that we haven't had a finance committee recently, and I'm sure we're going to discuss this in the near future. Personally, again, to answer Mr. Koopser, I would probably think that we should probably let the finance committee meet, but I don't know how everybody else feels.
So should it be a board president recommendation, say, okay, because I already agree, or should it be a full board consensus?
I think if there's agreement that the finance
We
committee
already have
meetings
that.
can resume until, the policy decisions are made, I think everyone would be happy. I think everyone is aware of the concern of whether or not decisions were made, and obviously, we're going to be very, very aware of that.
So then, since I was the one who put it in suspension, can I remove it?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm gonna-
Or maybe like Rebecca said, I agree with Rebecca, is that, Ms. Reed, I'm sorry, that you just like before, just ask everybody's opinion like you did informally before, if they feel that the finance committee should be resumed.
I think there was a consensus. Right
Yes.
now, we're all saying yes.
Absolutely.
So with that, and to follow the rules of the committee as it stands right now. So follow the rules of the committee as it is in the policy currently until we get the revisions updated. So you can reinstate the policy committee,
Finance Committee.
Finance.
finance committee.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My question to you, Steve.
I make a motion to adjourn.
That was on my last agenda.
I second.
And please vote on that motion.
You have to call for
All
the
in
vote.
favor?
There are 9 different areas.
You have to call for the vote.
You have a tendency to leave without
Oh, my
voting on
goodness.
adjourning the
We live
meeting,
and learn.
so that's, I'm just asking for a vote.
Roll call, please.
No, not a roll call, just a vote.
All in favor?
Okay, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you, good night.
So, I mean, I think as they're trying to